A lot of people believe you need another person to practice speaking English. You need a tutor. You need a language partner. You need someone sitting across from you asking questions and correcting your mistakes. And because of this belief, a huge number of learners simply never practice speaking at all because they don't have easy access to another person, or because scheduling conversation practice feels complicated, or because they feel too nervous to speak with a real person until their English is already good enough. This creates a strange trap. You need to speak to improve, but you feel like you need to already be good to speak. This trap is one of the biggest reasons learners stay stuck at the same speaking level for years, not because they lack knowledge, but because they are waiting for the perfect conditions to practice: a willing partner, a formal class, enough courage to speak in front of someone else, and those perfect conditions often never quite arrive, or they arrive so rarely that meaningful practice never becomes a consistent habit. Meanwhile, weeks and months pass by with almost no active speaking practice at all, even while reading and listening skills continue to slowly improve in the background. Today, I want to completely dismantle that belief. You do not need another person to build real speaking fluency. You can build an enormous amount of speaking skill entirely on your own, at home, with nobody listening and nobody judging. In fact, some of the most important speaking practice happens exactly this way, alone, without pressure, where you can experiment freely and build comfort before you ever need to speak in front of someone else. Today we are going to walk through exactly how to structure solo speaking practice so that it actually works, rather than just feeling like talking to yourself for no clear reason. Let's start with why solo practice is so effective in the first place, because understanding this will help you take it seriously instead of dismissing it as a lesser version of real practice. When you speak with another person, a huge portion of your mental energy goes into social processing. You are reading their reactions. You are managing the back and forth timing of conversation. You are worried about how you sound to them. All of this social processing competes with the actual language production happening in your brain, which means less mental capacity is available specifically for practicing English itself. When you practice alone, all of that social pressure disappears completely. Your full mental capacity is available for the actual skill you are trying to build, producing English quickly, fluently, and with correct pronunciation. This is not a weaker version of practice. In many ways, it is a pure version, specifically targeted at the language skill itself, without the added complexity of real-time social interaction layered on top. There is also a practical advantage that matters a great deal. Solo practice is available to you constantly, every single day, without needing to coordinate schedules, without needing to find a willing partner, and without any cost. This means you can practice speaking for 5 or 10 minutes almost any time you want, which makes consistency dramatically easier to maintain. And as we have discussed before, consistency matters far more for building real fluency than occasional long sessions. So, having a practice method that is always available removes one of the biggest obstacles to actually doing the work regularly. Now, let's get into the specific methods, because simply telling you to talk to yourself more is not particularly useful advice on its own. I want to give you clear, structured techniques you can start using today. The first method is narration. This means describing what you are doing out loud in English as you go about ordinary daily activities. If you are making coffee, describe it. I am filling the kettle with water. I am putting the coffee into the filter. I am waiting for the water to boil. If you're getting dressed, describe it. I am choosing a shirt. I am deciding whether to wear the blue one or the white one. If you are walking somewhere, describe your surroundings and what you notice. I see a lot of cars on this street today. That building looks new. I wonder when it was built. Narration works extremely well because it forces you to produce a constant stream of spontaneous English connected directly to real, immediate experience, rather than abstract topics you have to invent from nothing. You are never stuck wondering what to talk about because your surroundings and your actions are always giving you something new to describe. This makes narration one of the easiest techniques to start with, since the content essentially generates itself throughout your entire day. Start small with narration. You do not need to narrate your entire day from morning to night. Choose one activity, maybe making breakfast or getting ready in the morning, and commit to narrating just that one activity out loud in English every day. Once this starts to feel comfortable and automatic, add a second activity, then a third. Over time, you will find yourself naturally narrating more and more of your day without even deciding to, because the habit becomes part of how your mind engages with English throughout normal daily life. The second method is self-interview. This means asking yourself questions out loud and then answering them out loud, essentially playing both roles of a conversation by yourself. This might sound strange at first, but it is remarkably effective because it trains both the questioning and answering sides of real conversation, and it forces you to think about topics beyond simply narrating what is directly in front of you. Choose a topic before you start. Something simple like your weekend plans, your opinion about a recent event, or a memory from your past. Ask yourself an opening question out loud, such as "What did you do last weekend?" and then answer it fully out loud, as if you were speaking to a curious friend. Then ask yourself a natural follow-up question based on your own answer, and answer that one too. Continue this back and forth for several exchanges, building a full, extended conversation entirely on your own. This method is particularly useful because real conversations rarely stay on the surface level. They involve follow-up questions, deeper exploration of a topic, and natural back and forth development of ideas. Self-interview trains exactly this pattern, teaching you to think beyond a single short answer and develop your ideas more fully, the same way you would need to in an actual extended conversation with another person. The third method is the recording and review technique. This involves choosing a simple topic, setting a timer for 1 or 2 minutes, and speaking continuously about that topic without stopping, while recording yourself using your phone. The topic can be almost anything. Describe your ideal vacation. Explain how to cook your favorite meal. Talk about a goal you have for this year. The specific topic matters far less than the act of speaking continuously, without long pauses, for the full time period. After recording, listen back to yourself once, without judging too harshly. You are not looking for perfection.
You are simply noticing patterns.
Did you repeat the same simple words over and over instead of using more varied vocabulary? Did you pause frequently in the same types of places? Did your pronunciation feel unclear on any specific words? This kind of self-awareness, built through actually hearing yourself speak rather than just feeling how it went in the moment, is incredibly valuable because it is often very different from what you assumed while you were speaking. Many learners are surprised the first time they listen back to a recording of themselves because speaking often feels much harder or much more hesitant in the moment than it actually sounds on playback, or sometimes the opposite happens, and a recording reveals hesitations or repeated filler words that did not feel obvious while speaking. Either way, this feedback loop, speaking, recording, and listening back, is one of the fastest ways to build genuine self-awareness about your own specific speaking patterns, strengths, and areas that need more practice. Do this once or twice a week, choosing a new topic each time. Keep your recordings if you want to track progress over time. As we discussed in an earlier video in this series, listening back to a recording from several weeks ago next to a recent one is often one of the most motivating things you can do because it makes gradual, otherwise invisible progress suddenly very clear and concrete. The fourth method is reading aloud with expression. This involves taking a piece of text, an article, a page from a book, or even the transcript of a video, and reading it aloud, not in a flat, monotone way, but with real expression, emphasis, and natural intonation, as if you were genuinely telling this information to someone else in an engaging way. This method might seem less directly connected to spontaneous speaking, since you are reading existing text rather than generating your own sentences. However, it serves a valuable and different purpose. It trains pronunciation, rhythm, and natural intonation patterns in a lower pressure setting, since you do not have to think of what to say, only how to say it well. This frees up your full attention for the physical and expressive aspects of speaking, which, as we discussed in an earlier video, are often neglected because learners are usually too busy thinking about grammar and vocabulary to focus on pronunciation and intonation at the same time. Choose a short passage, just a paragraph or two, and read it aloud several times, each time trying to sound slightly more natural and engaging than the last. Pay attention to where a natural speaker would raise or lower their voice, where they would pause for emphasis, and where they would speed up or slow down. This kind of deliberate, expressive reading practice builds the same physical speaking muscles used in spontaneous conversation, even though the words themselves are not your own in this particular exercise. The fifth method is problem solving out loud. This involves taking a real or hypothetical problem and working through it out loud in English, explaining your thinking process as you go, the same way you might explain your reasoning to a colleague or a friend. This could be a genuine problem you are actually facing, like deciding between two options for an upcoming purchase, or it could be a hypothetical scenario, like explaining how you would plan a trip to a new city you have never visited. This method is particularly valuable because it trains a specific and important type of speaking, explaining reasoning and thought processes, which comes up constantly in real conversations, professional settings, and exams, but which is quite different from simply describing what you see or narrating a straightforward sequence of events. Thinking out loud in English forces you to use connecting words and logical structures. Words like because, however, on the other hand, and as a result, which are essential for sounding articulate and organized when speaking about more complex topics. Try this with a real decision you are currently facing, even something small, like choosing what to cook for dinner this week, or a slightly bigger decision like considering options for your weekend. Talk through the pros and cons out loud, explain your reasoning, and eventually state your conclusion, all in English, as if you were explaining your thought process to someone else who genuinely wanted to understand how you arrived at your decision. The sixth method is mirror practice. This involves standing in front of a mirror and speaking to yourself while watching your own face and body language, essentially practicing as if you were having a face-to-face conversation with a real person, except that person happens to be your own reflection. This might feel like an unusual technique compared to the previous 5, but it addresses something none of the others directly target, which is the physical and visual experience of speaking to another human being, including eye contact, facial expression, and natural gestures. A significant part of feeling confident in real conversations comes not just from the words themselves, but from how comfortable you feel physically while producing those words, maintaining eye contact, using natural hand movements and not feeling stiff or frozen while speaking. Practicing entirely through narration or self-interview without any visual component can build strong verbal fluency, but it sometimes leaves the physical, face-to-face aspect of conversation feeling separately underpracticed, which can create an odd disconnect the first few times you actually speak with a real person after weeks of solo practice. Mirror practice closes this gap. Choose a simple topic, the same way you would for self-interview or problem-solving out loud, and speak about it while looking at yourself in the mirror, maintaining eye contact with your own reflection as if it were another person. Notice your facial expressions. Are you making any expression at all, or does your face stay flat and neutral the entire time? Notice your body. Are you standing naturally, or are you stiff and tense? This kind of practice, though it might feel unusual at first, genuinely helps bridge the gap between purely verbal solo practice and the fuller physical experience of speaking with another person face to face. Now, I want to talk about how to structure these 6 methods into an actual daily or weekly routine, because knowing techniques individually is only useful if you can realistically fit them into your actual life without feeling overwhelmed. A simple and sustainable structure looks something like this. Use narration throughout small, natural moments in your day, whenever you are doing a routine activity like cooking, cleaning, or getting ready. Since this requires no extra scheduled time at all, it simply replaces silent thinking with spoken English during activities you're already doing anyway. Set aside 5 minutes most days for either self-interview or problem-solving out loud, alternating between the two depending on your mood or what feels more useful that day. Once or twice a week, do a longer recording and review session, spending 2 or 3 minutes speaking continuously on a chosen topic, then listening back afterward. Whenever you have a few spare minutes, perhaps while waiting for something or during a short break, use reading aloud with expression as a lower effort but still valuable filler activity. And once or twice a week, spend a few minutes with mirror practice, especially before any situation where you know you will need to speak with a real person soon, since it helps bridge the gap between solo verbal practice and the fuller physical experience of face-to-face conversation. None of these individual pieces require a large time commitment. Narration fits into time you're already spending on other activities. Self-interview and problem-solving take just 5 minutes. Recording sessions happen only once or twice a week. Reading aloud can happen in small spare moments throughout your day. Mirror practice takes only a few minutes whenever you choose to include it. Altogether, this adds up to a genuinely effective daily speaking practice routine, often totaling less than 15 or 20 minutes of dedicated practice time most days, which is a realistic and sustainable amount for almost anyone, regardless of how busy their schedule is. It can also help to think of these 6 methods as tools in a toolbox rather than a rigid checklist you must complete every single day without exception. Some days, you might only have time for narration during a single activity. Other days, when you have a bit more energy or a bit more free time, you might combine 2 or 3 methods into a slightly longer session. The specific combination matters far less than showing up consistently in some form, even a small one day after day, since consistency is what actually builds the underlying speaking reflexes we have been discussing throughout this series. I also want to address a concern that comes up often when learners first hear about practicing speaking alone. It can feel strange, even a little silly, to talk to yourself out loud, especially if other people might hear you. This feeling is completely normal, and it usually fades much faster than people expect once they get past the first few sessions. A few practical tips can help with this. Practice in private spaces where you feel comfortable, like your bedroom, your car, or during a walk with headphones on, which makes it look to anyone nearby like you are simply on a phone call. Start with quieter, lower energy narration if speaking loudly feels too uncomfortable at first, and gradually increase your volume and expressiveness as you become more used to the practice. Remind yourself that this discomfort is temporary and directly tied to unfamiliarity, not to anything actually wrong with the practice itself, and it consistently fades with repetition, the same way any new habit feels awkward before it becomes normal. I also want to be clear that solo practice, while extremely valuable, is not meant to completely replace real conversations with other people forever. The goal of solo practice is to build a strong foundation of comfort, speed, and confidence so that when you do have opportunities to speak with real people, whether that's a language exchange partner, a tutor, or simply English-speaking friends and colleagues, you are already significantly more prepared and less overwhelmed than you would have been without this kind of dedicated solo groundwork. Think of solo practice as training and real conversations as the actual game. Both matter, but training on your own consistently is often what makes the difference between feeling constantly overwhelmed during real conversations and feeling reasonably prepared and confident when those conversations happen. So here is what I want you to do this week. Choose 2 of the 6 methods we covered today: narration, self-interview, recording and review, reading aloud with expression, problem-solving out loud, or mirror practice. Pick the 2 that feel most appealing or most realistic to fit into your current daily routine. Commit to practicing those 2 methods consistently for the next 7 days, even if each session is quite short. At the end of the week, notice how it felt. Which method felt more natural? Which one do you want to continue? Which one might you want to swap out for a different technique from today's list? Building a sustainable solo speaking practice routine is not about doing everything perfectly from day one. It is about finding a small, realistic set of habits that you can actually maintain consistently over time, since consistent, moderate practice over many weeks will always outperform occasional, intense practice that you cannot sustain for more than a few days before giving up. Tomorrow, we're going to shift focus slightly and talk about building vocabulary in a way that actually sticks and actually shows up naturally in your speaking, rather than vocabulary that you technically know but somehow never actually use in real conversations, which is an incredibly common frustration for learners who have studied extensively but still feel limited to a fairly narrow range of words when they actually speak. If today's video gave you a clear, practical way to start practicing speaking without needing to wait for a tutor or a language partner, that is a genuinely important shift because it means your speaking practice no longer depends on anyone else's schedule or availability but your own. Let us know in the comments which 2 methods you're going to try this week. This is day 4 of English Rewired's 10-day English series, and I will see you tomorrow for day 5.